The only reason that I care about the Super Bowl can be summed up in 3 words: hot cheese dip. Today I'm going to show you how to make my 3 favorites from scratch. The first dip is going to be a gooey, creamy Chile Con Queso dip. To get started, I'm going to grab 1 large poblano pepper and throw it right onto my gas burner on the stovetop. I'm basically burning this pepper over a direct flame so that I can impart a little bit of charred, smoky, roasty flavor into its flesh, and so that this pepper's skin is easier to peel. After about 90 seconds on the first side, I'm going to come back with tongs to flip this pepper over and continue to char it on the opposite side. In total, it's probably going to take 5 to 6 minutes for the skin to get fully charred all the way around and for the flesh of the pepper to start to get tender. Once the whole thing is deeply charred and starting to sag a little bit in the middle like this, I'm going to grab it off the burner with tongs and transfer it over to a medium bowl. Now I'm going to wrap this up with plastic wrap to let the steam and heat from the pepper continue to loosen the charred exterior and make it more tender. After 10 minutes of steaming under that plastic wrap, the pepper is now fully softened and ready to be cleaned up for the dip. Using the side of my blade, I'm going to scrape off the char. If we got things tender enough, those should slide off really easily. I'll also cut off the seed pod on top and then keep scraping to get rid of as much of that charred skin as possible. Once the poblano is all cleaned up like this, I'll give it a medium dice. And I'll mention, if you're not willing to burn a vegetable under open flame indoors, you can sub in these diced canned green chilies. This style of product is what gets used in most Mexican restaurants, and that's because they have good flavor, but in my opinion, a fresh fire roasted poblano pepper is better. Now, to make this sauce, I'm going to add 60 grams of butter into a high-sided pot that was preheated over medium-high heat. Once that's melty, in goes 100 grams of onion and 15 grams of minced garlic. For the onions, I give them a pretty small dice because personally, I don't want big chunks of onion in my queso. And for the garlic, I used a garlic press to get it really broken down so that hopefully it melts into the background of this sauce. Next, I'll hit the onions and garlic with a strong pinch of salt to start to draw out their moisture, and then I'll stir everything together and let this sweat for about 5 minutes. Once the onion and garlic have softened up a little bit and are starting to lose their water like this, I'll add in 150 grams of diced fresh tomatoes and then all of the fire roasted poblano pepper that we just made, about 100 grams. For the tomato, I used a lame out of season variety from the grocery store, but for this recipe, it doesn't really matter a whole lot how perfectly flavorful the tomato is. All I'm really looking for in a queso tomato is a little bit of texture and some sweet acidic juiciness, and these tomatoes have plenty of that. So I'm going to stir those in and cook with the peppers, the onions, and the garlic for just a few minutes over low heat while I get the queso part of this queso sorted out. I've decided to split this job between 2 different cheeses. The first is a mild, melty Pepperjack cheese, and the second is a medium sharp cheddar cheese. Most of the flavor comes from the cheddar, and the creamy, saucy body comes from the jack. I'm using about a half pound or 225 grams of each cheese in this dip, and I'm going to be grating both of them on the largest hold sides of my box grater. Once both cheeses are broken down, I'm going to scoot them into a medium bowl and then add in 15 grams of cornstarch and then toss everything to coat. This little bit of cornstarch is going to ensure that our cheese sauce doesn't split and or get grainy. The alternative stabilizer here would be a butter and flour roux, and that works well, but I feel it kind of blunts the sharp cheesy flavor and makes the sauce overly heavy. Once my cheese is all starched up, I'll move the bowl over to the stove and then check back on my veg. As you can see, the tomatoes and peppers have stewed down quite a bit and they're looking great. So now I'm going to add in 2 12-ounce cans or 700 grams total of evaporated milk. The added protein in evaporated milk really helps hold cheese sauces together much better than regular milk, and it gives it a nice velvety, creamy texture. Once that's all up to a simmer, I'll turn the heat down to its lowest setting and then add in half of my grated cheese. I'll stir that in, and once it's just about melted into the milk, I'll add in the other half of my cheese and stir that in. The starch and the milk together really make the melting part of this queso pretty much bulletproof, and it goes super easy. Flavor-wise, I really love the balance of the 50-50 blend of cheddar and jack cheeses. I did try 100% cheddar cheese sauce, and while it was very good, it was too similar to a cheesesteak style sauce, and it really couldn't be called queso. This sauce, on the other hand, is a tad thinner, it's creamier, and thanks to the pepper, tomato, garlic, and onions, it's more intensely flavored, and I think more memorable. Overall, Chile Con Queso is low impact in terms of prep, high payoff in terms of flavor, and for sure deserves to be called a dope dip. Now, the next cheese dip is probably the most misunderstood cheese dip of all time, and I'm talking about spinach artichoke dip. To get started, I'm going to grab a large saute pan and drop it over medium-high heat. Once the pan's hot, in goes a long squeezer of olive oil and then a 1-pound bag of spinach, about 450 grams. I'll give that a strong pinch of salt and then I'll stir everything up to get this fluffed up spinach down into the pan. From there, I'm just going to wilt this down until the water is mostly cooked off and the whole pound has gotten nice and tender. That should take about 3 to 4 minutes. Now, once it's looking tender and dry like this, I'm going to scoot this out of the pan and onto a double-lined paper towel on a sheet tray to drain it off. Then, using another double layer of paper towel, I'm going to press this very hard to get as much water out of it as humanly possible. As I'm sure you're aware, spinach is like 900% water and there's a lot of it to get out of there. Now, once these leaves are squished dry like this, I'm going to flip them out onto my cutting board and then give them a very thorough chop. In a way, I'm trying to replicate the particle size of a chopped frozen spinach, but with fresh. The reason I'm using fresh over frozen is mainly because frozen spinach doesn't really taste like anything. Once that's really well broken down, I'm going to set the spinach aside and then preheat my oven to 425F, 220C, and then grab my food processor to make the dip. Into that goes 1 pound or 225 grams of cream cheese, 110 grams of mayonnaise, 110 grams of sour cream, 40 grams of grated Parmesan cheese, 65 grams of rough chopped shallots, and 5 grams of minced fresh garlic. The powders of onions and garlic could work here if you wanted to simplify this, but I think the savory edge of the fresh for both really sets this dip apart. Behind that, I'll add in 60 grams of grated cheeses. What cheeses specifically? Well, 60 grams of a flavorful aged cheese, in this case a 2-year white cheddar, but Gruyere or aged Gouda would be a really good option as well. And then 60 grams of a young, mild melting cheese, in this case Pepperjack. You could also use mozzarella or provolone. Both cheeses are going to get grated on the largest hold sides of my box grater, and then half of the blend goes into the dip and the other half is going to go on top later on. Behind the cheese, I'll add in 10 grams of lemon juice, 2 grams of salt, 2 grams of black pepper, and 2 grams of chili flake. The lid goes on and I'll spin this dip for about 30 to 45 seconds or until the shallots, garlic, and cheese are all well combined into a unified spread that I call cheese dip base. Cheese dip base. I call it a base because this combination of ingredients can have all kinds of other delicious stuff folded into it to make various dips, from roasted red bell peppers, caramelized onions, chorizo, or maybe this bacon that I just got from the sponsor of this video, ButcherBox. ButcherBox delivers delicious grass-fed beef, free-range poultry, wild seafood, and crate-free pork right to your door. And right now, new members get 2 free pounds of 100% grass-fed ground beef in every box forever. As long as you're a member with ButcherBox, you get free meat in your box for life. That extra 2 pounds of ground beef is actually really awesome for last-minute tacos or meatballs when you're in a pinch and you don't have a ton of thawed meat on hand. And this ground beef is a great representation of what ButcherBox does best. It's 100% grass-fed, no added hormones, no antibiotics ever, and it's full of healthy omega-3s. The way ButcherBox works is super simple too. You order a box depending on what meats you prefer. This month I ordered the custom box and got some pork ribs, a whole chicken, and some breakfast sausage. And oh yeah, free ground beef. Did I mention that? From there, you tell ButcherBox how often you need a shipment of meat. They pack it frozen at the height of freshness and then ship it directly to you for free. So to get yourself 2 free pounds of ground beef in every box for life, click the link in my description and sign up for ButcherBox. Look at this taco meat. It was free. Are you guys getting this? Don't miss this. Free ground beef. It's grass-fed. Link in the description. Thank you, ButcherBox. Next, into this base, I'm going to add 1 can or about 240 grams of chopped artichokes. I'm opting to use canned here because I think they taste pretty good, and I've been down the road with fresh in a previous video that no one saw. I realized that no one would make the recipe if they had to buy fresh artichokes, clean them, and then poach them. That is a really delicious way to make this dip, and I endorse buying and cooking your own if you want to, but it's not the only good way to make it. So I drained off a nice can of artichokes and chopped them like this, and I'm happy about it. Next, I'm gonna add in all of my drained and chopped spinach and then spin this dip one more time to get everything mixed together. I'm spinning for maybe 15 or 20 seconds in total. You definitely wanna leave some texture in there. You really don't wanna turn this into a puree. After 15 seconds of spinning, when I pop off the lid, you can see that this looks pretty delicious. If you wanted to, you could call it quits right now and serve this as a banger of a cold dip, or even put it on a turkey wrap or a toasty baguette. The sky is the limit with spin dip is all I'm trying to say. This is a hot dips vid though, so I'm gonna bake mine in an 8x8 brownie pan. I recommend metal pans over other options just because they tend to get hotter and kind of fry / caramelize the edges of the dip in a really special way that just doesn't happen in ceramic or glass. I'll scoop my dip into the pan, level it off, and then from there I'm gonna top it with 30 to 40 grams of grated Parmesan cheese and then the other 60 grams of the aged white cheddar and Pepperjack blend from before. Now I'm gonna load this into my preheated oven and bake it for 20 to 25 25 minutes, depending on how hot your oven is and how browned you like it. Personally, I prefer to bake it quite dark, so I'm gonna go for 25 to maybe even 30 minutes. At that point, the dip is bubbling and well browned from edge to edge, and when I pull it out, you can see the cheeses have all melted together and there's some good deep caramelization happening in the corners. This is a supremely powerful cheese dip. That fresh spinach brings the whole thing together with some nice subtle meatiness, and the artichokes bring an almost mushroomy quality. So I say make this dip, bring it to a party, and post up in a corner nearby so that you can hear all of the guests shower you with compliments about how dope this dip is and how cool you must be. Okay, last dip, and maybe the best dip too. I'm talking about a spicy, tangy, zippy, buff chick dip. To get started, I'm going to need 1 pound or 450 grams of chicken breast meat, and over at the stove, I'm going to lower those into a shallow saute pan of well-salted water that's barely at a simmer. Once the breasts are in, I'm going to lower the heat to medium-low, and now I'm going to poach them. The water should be well below a boil, probably closer to 190 F. If you're wondering, hey Bri, why are you boiling chicken breasts? That sounds like a pretty bad idea. Well, actually, it's not. Cooking lean proteins that are skinless, like chicken breast, in seasoned water is actually the quickest, gentlest way to convert them from raw protein into cooked meat. After about 4 minutes on side one, I'm going to flip these breasts over to make sure they're getting cooked evenly, and I'll continue to poach them on the other side for another 4 to 5 minutes. After 10 minutes of poaching, I'm going to use my instant read thermometer to check this for doneness. In the thickest part of the breast, I'm looking for a temperature in the ballpark of about 165 F, and we're there. So now I'm going to fish these out of the water and transfer them over to a little BB sheet tray to cool them off. 10 minutes later, or once these breasts are closer to room temp, I'm going to jump in and shred the meat. I want to mention that 165F 75C is about 15 degrees higher than I would normally go for a nice juicy piece of breast meat. But for this dip, we need well done meat. If we use the juicy meat cooked to 150F, when we bake the dip, the chicken would lose a bunch of those juices, and that's going to make the dip weirdly loose and watery. Once the chicken is fully shredded, I'm going to go one more step here and chop the meat to get it even more broken down. I'm personally not a huge fan of large shreddy meat in my buffalo chicken dip, but if you are, don't chop it. After the breasts are well chopped down like this, now I'm going to scoot that meat into the bowl of my stand mixer, and on top of the chicken, I'll add in 225 grams or a 1 pound block of cream cheese. I'll pop on the paddle attachment, and then I'll spin this to combine with the chicken. If you go hand mix here, I would recommend microwaving the cream cheese a little bit until it's very soft. That way, folding it together by hand with the chicken will actually be possible. Once the cream cheese is mixed in, I'll add in 100 grams of sour cream and paddle that in for 10 to 15 seconds. Getting all the creamy stuff mixed together with the chicken up front makes for the least grainy, least broken dip in my experience. Behind the sour cream, I'll add in 175 grams of Frank's brand hot sauce. Use whatever you like. Frank's seems to work well for me. Next in is 30 grams of finely minced shallots, 10 grams of minced garlic, 50 grams of Pepperjack cheese, 50 grams of medium sharp cheddar cheese, 25 grams of blue cheese crumbles, 1 gram or a small pinch of salt, 2 grams of black pepper, and the secret ingredient, which is 20 to 25 grams of finely minced chipotle and adobo. These bring some additional heat along with them, so if you're tender about that kind of thing, I would say use half to start. Or maybe sub in a non-spicy roasted red bell pepper for a similar flavor but without the smoke. Once everything's in the bowl, now I'm going to paddle it on low speed to get things incorporated for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, and then from there I'm going to hit this mixture with high speed paddling to break down the chicken a little bit more and to make things homogeneous. When it's done, it should look kind of like chicken salad that was made with Thousand Island dressing instead of mayonnaise. Man, that would be like a good vid actually. Dibs on that idea, dibs. Now I'm going to load this dip into the same 8x8 brownie pan that I used for the spinach and artichoke dip, but if you don't have one, a cast iron pan would be a really good option. Once that's spread out, I'm going to top with a few pinches of blue cheese crumbles, maybe 20 grams or so, then a blend of both of the cheeses that we used inside of the dip. Again, that's Pepperjack cheese and mildly sharp cheddar. Now into a 400F 205C oven this goes, and I'll bake it for 20 to 25 minutes or until the top is well browned and the whole thing has gotten bubbly and melty. I know the dip's looking good and is close to being done when it's looking kind of like a bubbling red hot cheese lava. Yeah, like that. Now I'm going to pull it out so that we can take a closer look. As you can see, it's properly nuclear orange now. It's almost like cartoon food, and that's how you know it's gonna be sick. For me, buffalo chicken is the dip. It's spicy, it's zesty, a little bit funky from the creamy blue cheese, and it tastes like so much more than the sum of its parts. The smoky chipotles have really done some heavy lifting here too. There's just a touch of spicy smoke in each bite, and that really elevates the entire recipe just beyond the one that's on the hot sauce bottle. Whether you go with chili con queso, spinach artichoke, or buffalo chicken dip, I think any or all three of these dips would dominate at whatever sports themed party that they're brought to. I really hope you give them a try soon, and let me know in the comments which one you plan on making. Let's eat this thing.